Long before Atlantis became a legend, the Earth itself told a quieter story. You're listening to Made for Sleep, where history unfolds gently and without urgency. Tonight, we explore the geomythology of the Santorini Eruption, and how a real volcanic night may have slowly transformed into the story of Atlantis over generations of memory. Let the rain blur myth and history together, and if you'd like, let me know how you're doing in the comments, and what time it is where you're listening from. You're drifting back to a time when the Aegean Sea cradled hundreds of islands, and the people who lived there shaped their understanding of the world through story, stone, and the slow turning of seasons. Here, across warm waters and sunlit shores, memory and landscape became quietly inseparable, and the earth beneath their feet held stories that would echo for thousands of years. You wake before dawn in a small coastal settlement, where the first light touches whitewashed walls and the smell of the sea drifts through open doorways. Your neighbours are already moving, their footsteps soft on packed earth as they make their way toward the harbour. This is how most mornings begin. There is bread to bake, nets to mend, and boats to prepare. The rhythm is familiar, shaped by tides and weather, by the seasons that dictate when to plant and when to harvest. The island where you live is one of many scattered across the Aegean, each with its own character but all sharing the same dependence on the sea. Fishing provides much of what your community needs. Men and women work together to haul in the day's catch, sorting through silvery fish that will be salted, dried, or traded. Children help carry baskets, learning the work by watching and imitating. There is no rush, only the steady pace of hands that know their task well. Inland, farmers tend terraced fields where barley and lentils grow in soil, enriched by centuries of careful cultivation. The terraces follow the contours of the hillside, each level supported by low stone walls built by hands that understood how to work with the land rather than against it. Olive trees dot the slopes. Their twisted trunks and silvery leaves are constant presence. Harvesting olives is a communal effort, families gathering to shake the branches and collect the fruit in woven baskets. The oil pressed from these olives will light lamps, flavour food, and serve as currency in trades with neighbouring islands. Trade itself is woven into the fabric of daily life. Small boats move between islands, carrying goods that each community produces in abundance. Pottery from one island is exchanged for wine from another. Obsidian, prized for its sharp edge, travels from volcanic islands to places where such stone is rare. Textiles woven from wool and dyed with plants or shellfish find their way into distant markets. These exchanges are not merely transactions, but relationships, bonds formed over shared meals and repeated visits that span generations. Your home is modest, built from stone and clay with a flat roof that can be used for drying fruit or sleeping on warm nights. Inside, storage jars hold grain, oil and water. A hearth anchors the central room, its fire tended carefully throughout the day. Cooking is simple but sufficient. Bread, fish, vegetables, cheese and fruit make up most meals. Honey sweetens special occasions. Wine, diluted with water, accompanies gatherings. Life moves in cycles you can anticipate. Spring brings planting and the return of migrating birds. Summer means long days of work under a bright sun, followed by evenings spent outdoors where breezes cool the air. Autumn is harvest time, when the fruits of the year's labour are gathered and stored. Winter brings quieter days, time for repair and craft, for weaving and tool-making, for the stories that hold your community's memory. Religious observance is part of this rhythm too, though it feels less like ceremony and more like acknowledgement. Small shrines dot the landscape, places where offerings are left to honour the forces that govern your world. A bit of grain poured onto the ground, a cup of wine spilled into the sea, flowers placed on a stone altar. These gestures are simple, a way of maintaining balance with the world around you. Neighbours know each other well. Disputes are settled through discussion. often with the guidance of elders whose experience commands respect. Celebrations mark births, marriages, and successful harvests. Music comes from simple instruments, flutes and drums that accompany singing and dancing. Children play games that teach cooperation and skill, running through narrow streets or along the shore where waves lap at the sand. The sea is always present, its moods familiar. Calm days allow for longer journeys. Rougher weather keeps boats close to shore. Storms are respected but not feared. Your ancestors learned to read the sky and water, to know when conditions favour travel and when it is wiser to wait. This knowledge passes from one generation to the next, carried in stories and observation, in the thousand small lessons that come from living close to something powerful yet predictable. Evenings often find you seated outside, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The sky shifts through shades of orange and pink, then deepens to blue and finally to the soft darkness where stars emerge one by one. These moments feel timeless, as though your grandparents and their grandparents before them saw the same sky, felt the same breeze, and heard the same gentle sounds of a community settling into rest. This is the world you inhabit, unremarkable in its rhythms yet rich in the small comforts that steady hands and familiar routines provide. The land is generous when tended with care. The sea offers its bounty to those who respect its nature. And the people around you, bound by shared labour and shared seasons, form a web of support that makes life not just survivable, but quietly good. The islands of the Aegean rest on a foundation that is far older than human memory, shaped by forces that work on a timescale measured in thousands and millions of years. Beneath the blue waters and fertile slopes, the earth itself is slowly, constantly in motion. This movement is gentle on a human scale, nearly imperceptible in the span of a single lifetime, but over long ages it has built mountains, opened seas, and created the very ground you walk upon. Your island, like many others in the Aegean, owes its existence to volcanic activity. Deep below the surface, molten rock rises from the Earth's interior, finding pathways through cracks and weaknesses in the crust. When this molten material reaches the surface, it cools and solidifies, layer upon layer, gradually building cones and ridges that eventually break through the sea to become islands. The process is not rapid. It happens in increments, in eruptions separated by decades or centuries, each one adding to what came before. The soil you farm is a gift from these volcanic origins. Ash and weathered lava break down over time into rich, dark earth that holds moisture and nutrients well. This fertility is why your ancestors chose to settle here, why they cleared terraces and planted crops that thrived in soil that seemed almost generous in what it could produce. The volcanic minerals feed the olive trees and grapevines, giving their fruit a quality that traders recognize and value. Not all the islands share the same story. Some are limestone built from ancient seabeds lifted slowly above the water. Others are a mix, volcanic cores surrounded by sedimentary layers deposited when the sea covered what is now land. These differences show in the landscape. Limestone islands often have caves and underground streams, their rock dissolving slowly in rainwater. Volcanic islands tend towards steeper slopes and darker stone, their surfaces newer in geological terms. The Aegean itself is a young sea, carved out as tectonic plates shifted and pulled apart. Where the African plate pushes northward against the Eurasian plate, the Earth responds by folding, faulting, and occasionally releasing tension through earthquakes. These tremors are part of life here, noticed but not dwelled upon. A shaking that rattles cups and sends people outdoors for a moment, then passes. Buildings are constructed with this in mind, walls thick and low, designed to flex rather than shatter. Volcanic islands sometimes show signs of their fiery origins in ways that are visible on the surface. Hot springs bubble up in certain locations, their water carrying minerals that leave colourful deposits on the surrounding rock. Steam vents release warmth into the air. These features are considered useful, even beneficial. The hot water soothes aches and is thought to have healing properties. The warmth from vents can be harnessed for cooking or keeping spaces comfortable during cooler months. Coastlines are not fixed. Over generations they shift in response to the sea's persistent work. Waves carve into softer rock, creating coves and beaches. Sediment carried by rivers and streams accumulates in sheltered bays, gradually extending the land. Cliffs erode, their material tumbling into the water and eventually becoming sand. Harbours that once offered deep anchorage may silt up, requiring communities to adapt, to build in new locations or dredge channels to maintain access. The sea floor itself holds remnants of past landscapes. Pottery shards and stone anchors rest on submerged shelves that were once dry land, drowned when sea levels rose as ice sheets melted at the end of colder periods. These changes happened gradually, over centuries, giving people time to move upslope, to resettle, and to adjust. The stories of those older settlements fade but do not disappear entirely, preserved in fragments and in the collective memory of where ancestors once lived. Islands also rise and fall, though the movement is slow. Tectonic forces can lift sections of the coast, leaving ancient beaches perched above the current shoreline. Other areas subside, sinking gradually so that structures built at the water's edge eventually stand in shallow water. These shifts are noticed when old markers no longer align with the present landscape, when a stone that once sat well above the tide now feels the sea's reach. The volcanic character of the region means that some islands have craters, broad depressions where the centre of the volcano has collapsed inward. These calderas can fill with water, creating sheltered harbours or lakes. The process of collapse is not sudden from a human perspective. It occurs over many eruptions as magma chambers empty and the ground above slowly settles into the space left behind. By the time you see a caldera, it is already ancient, its formation complete long before your community's memory. This landscape, varied and slowly shifting, provides the stage for human life. The same forces that create rich soil and sheltered bays also shape the stories people tell about the world. When the earth shakes, when steam rises from a fissure, when a distant island changes shape over the course of generations, these events become woven into the fabric of understanding. They are explained, remembered, and passed down, not as mysteries, but as parts of the natural order that deserve respect and attention. Stories are the threads that connect one generation to the next, carrying forward what matters most about how the world works and where your community comes from. In a culture without written records, memory is shared through telling and retelling, through the rhythm of repeated phrases and the structure of narratives that make information easier to hold and pass along. This is how knowledge survives, how the past remains present, and how explanations for unusual events take shape and endure. You grow up hearing these stories. They come in the evenings, when work is done, and people gather in the fading light. Elders speak, and younger listeners absorb not just the words but the patterns, the ways of describing and explaining that make sense of the world. Some stories are about ancestors, about the founding of your settlement, or the first person to plant an olive tree on this particular hillside. Others explain natural phenomena, offering frameworks for understanding why the earth shakes, why some years bring more rain than others, why certain islands have features that others lack. These narratives are not rigid. Each telling can shift slightly depending on the teller, the audience, and the circumstances. Details are added or subtracted, emphasis moves, and new observations are woven in. This flexibility allows the story to stay relevant and to adapt to what the community knows and needs. Yet the core remains stable, held in place by the structure itself, by phrases that are repeated the same way each time, and by sequences of events that follow a familiar order. When something unusual happens, the community works to make sense of it. An earthquake that is stronger than most, a change in the shape of a nearby island, a particularly vivid sunset that paints the sky in unfamiliar colours. These events are discussed compared to past occurrences, fitted into the framework of what is already understood. Over time, the most striking events become part of the communal memory, shaped into narratives that explain what happened and why it mattered. The process is collaborative. Multiple voices contribute, each adding perspective. Someone remembers a similar event from their childhood. Another recalls what their grandparents said about an even older occurrence. Details are debated, consensus is reached, and gradually a version emerges that satisfies the need for explanation. This version is then repeated and refined through telling, until it settles into a form that can be remembered and passed on. Symbols and imagery help carry these memories. A great wave is described in terms that evoke its size and power, without needing to recount every specific detail. A volcanic eruption might be remembered through the colour of the sky, the smell of the air, and the way ash settled on rooftops. These sensory markers anchor the story, making it vivid enough to stay in memory across years and generations. Geography plays a role in what is remembered. Islands that are visible from your shore are part of your daily experience, and changes to those islands are noticed and remarked upon. More distant places, known only through the accounts of travellers and traders, exist in memory differently. They are real but less immediate, their stories filtered through second-hand tellings. When such places undergo significant change, the news arrives gradually, carried by those who witnessed it or heard about it from others who did. Trade routes spread stories just as they spread goods. A trader from another island brings news of an event, a description of something unusual. This account is shared with your community, compared to what you already know, and incorporated into your understanding. Over time, stories can travel far from their origins, changing shape as they pass through different languages and cultural contexts, but retaining enough of their essence that a trace of the original event remains. Religious and ritual contexts also preserve memory. Certain stories are told as part of seasonal observances or ceremonies that mark important moments in the community's life. These ritual tellings add weight to the narrative, embedding it in a framework that is repeated regularly. The repetition ensures that the story does not fade, that each new generation hears it and learns to tell it themselves. Not every event is remembered equally. Some fade quickly, too ordinary or too small to warrant retelling. Others persist because they touch something fundamental, because they challenged assumptions or required explanation, because they were witnessed by many and discussed widely. The events that endure in memory are those that mattered, that shaped how people understood their world or altered the landscape in ways that could not be ignored. The line between history and myth is not always clear. Over generations, the details of an actual event can become embellished, simplified, or combined with elements from other stories. A flood that displaced communities might be remembered as a great inundation, its causes attributed to divine action, or cosmic shifts rather than the specific geological processes that triggered it. This transformation is not a failure of memory, but a reflection of how oral tradition works, preserving the impact of an event even as the precise mechanisms fade into the background. Your role as a listener is to receive these stories, to hold them in your own memory so that you can pass them on when the time comes. You learn to recognize the patterns, to understand when a story is being told for instruction and when it is being shared for reflection. You notice how certain tales are told to children to teach them about safety or respect for the natural world, while others are shared among adults who can appreciate the complexity and nuance. This web of shared memory creates continuity. It ties your community to the land and sea, to the events that shaped both, and to the understanding that what you experience now is part of a longer story. The earth shifts, the sea changes, and people adapt. These truths are held in the stories you carry, in the knowledge that is given freely and received with care, in the ongoing conversation between past and present that defines who you are. Life in the Aegean is shaped not only by work, but also by the patterns of rest that allow you to sustain effort over time. These rhythms are as essential as the labour itself, providing structure to your days and marking the transitions between seasons, between periods of intensity and periods of ease. Midday rest is a practice woven into the fabric of daily routine. As the sun climbs and the heat intensifies, activity slows. Fields are left, boats secured, and people retreat to shaded spaces or the cool interiors of their homes. This pause is not laziness, but wisdom, a recognition that the hottest hours are better spent conserving energy than expending it. You rest, sometimes sleeping, sometimes simply sitting in stillness, while the world outside shimmers with heat. During these quiet hours, the landscape itself seems to pause. Animals seek shade, birds are less vocal. The sea reflects the sky in a smooth, glassy surface. This is a time that feels suspended, as though the day is holding its breath before resuming. When the temperature begins to drop and the light softens, activity resumes gradually, with people emerging to complete tasks or begin new ones with the benefit of cooler air. Evenings offer a different kind of rest, communal and reflective. As work ends, you gather with neighbours, sharing simple meals or sitting together while children play nearby. Conversations meander, touching on the events of the day, plans for tomorrow, and observations about weather or crops. There is no urgency, only the gentle exchange of thoughts and presence. Nighttime brings a deeper rest, the kind that allows the body to recover and the mind to process the accumulation of experience. You sleep on woven mats or simple beds, the air moving through open windows or doorways. In warmer months, some people sleep on rooftops, where breezes carry the scent of the sea and the sky stretches overhead, vast and filled with stars. This practice turns sleep into a connection with the larger world, a reminder that you are part of something greater than the confines of walls and daily tasks. The rhythm of the year also includes longer periods of rest. After harvest, when the work of gathering and storing is complete, there is time to repair, to create, and to engage in projects that cannot be pursued during busier seasons. This is when new tools are made, when textiles are woven, and when attention can be given to crafts that require patience and focus. The pace is slower, the pressure lessened, and this interval allows you to approach the next cycle of planting and growth with renewed energy. Festivals and communal celebrations punctuate the year, serving as both rest and renewal. These gatherings interrupt the routine, offering time for music, dancing, feasting, and the kinds of interactions that strengthen bonds between people. Preparations for a festival are themselves a form of rest from regular labour, a shift in focus that feels lighter even as it requires effort. The celebration itself is a release, a collective exhaling that marks the passage of time and the continuation of community. Rest is also found in the small pauses throughout the day, a moment to watch the sea, to notice the play of light on water, a brief stop to greet a neighbour, to exchange a few words that carry warmth and recognition. These intervals are not planned but arise naturally, and they serve to break the monotony of repetitive tasks, to remind you that life is not only about accomplishment, but also about presence. Sleep, too, varies with the seasons. Longer winter nights offer extended rest, a gift of darkness that allows the body to recover from the exertions of the year. Summer nights are shorter, but often broken by the need to tend to animals or to check on drying crops. Even so, the total amount of rest balances over time, the body adjusting to the demands and opportunities of each season. Children learn these rhythms by living within them, observing when adults pause and understanding that rest is part of the natural order. They nap when tired, play when energized, and absorb the knowledge that there is a time for everything. This education is subtle, delivered not through instruction, but through the simple act of participating in a community that values rest as much as it values work. Even in times of change, when the land shifts or the sea behaves unexpectedly, the rhythms of rest persist. After an earthquake, once the immediate response is complete and safety is confirmed, people return to their beds. After a storm passes and the damage is assessed, routines resume. This continuity is reassuring, a signal that while individual events may disrupt, the larger patterns of life remain intact. Rest also carries a spiritual dimension, though it is not always articulated as such. In pausing, in allowing time for stillness and reflection, you create space for a different kind of awareness. The world reveals itself in these quiet moments, not through dramatic revelation, but through the accumulation of small observations. The way light changes as the sun sets, the sound of waves meeting the shore in a steady, unchanging rhythm, the coolness of stone under your hand as you lean against a wall, breathing slowly and feeling the day settle around you. These rhythms of rest, daily and seasonal, provide the scaffolding that supports all other aspects of life. Without them, the work would become unsustainable, the community would fray, and the connection to the land and sea would weaken. But with them, life finds balance, moving between effort and ease, between action and stillness, in a pattern that has sustained your people for as long as memory holds. The Aegean Sea is not a barrier, but a pathway, a network of routes that connects island to island and coast to coast. The water that surrounds you is familiar territory, its moods and rhythms as well known as the land itself. Fishermen navigate by landmarks, by the shape of distant hills, and the position of the sun, by knowledge passed down through countless voyages. The sea is where livelihoods are earned, and where relationships with other communities are built and maintained. Trade is the lifeblood of this interconnected world. Your island produces certain things in abundance, olives and oil perhaps, or pottery shaped from local clay. Other islands have their own specialties, wine, grain, or woven textiles dyed in colours specific to their region. These goods move across the water in small boats, carried by traders who know the routes and the people at each destination. The exchanges are personal, built on trust and the expectation of reciprocity. You give what you have in surplus, and you receive what you lack, and the relationship continues year after year. Harbours serve as gathering points, places where boats arrive and depart, where news is shared and plans are made. These spaces are busy but not chaotic, organised by the routines that govern loading and unloading, by the customs that dictate when and how transactions occur. Traders know each other, greet each other by name, inquire after families and conditions on other islands. The harbour is where the wider world touches your daily life, where the Aegean reveals itself as a community of communities rather than a collection of isolated settlements. Navigation relies on observation and experience. Sailors learn to read the sea, to recognise currents and wind patterns, and to understand how weather systems move across the region. Certain times of year are more favourable for long journeys, when winds blow steadily from predictable directions and storms are less frequent. Other periods call for caution, for staying closer to shore and being prepared to shelter if conditions change. This knowledge is practical and essential, the difference between safe passage and unnecessary risk. Islands are not uniform in their resources or their geography, and this variation drives trade. An island with good harbours but limited farmland imports grain. Another with abundant timber exports wood for boat building and construction. Obsidian from volcanic islands travels widely, valued for tools and weapons. Salt, fish and preserved foods move from coastal settlements to inland regions. Each exchange strengthens the network, creating interdependence that benefits all participants. Cultural exchange accompanies the movement of goods. Traders carry stories, songs and techniques from one place to another. A method of weaving learned on one island is shared and adapted by artisans elsewhere. A musical instrument becomes popular across the region. Religious practices and symbols spread, sometimes merging with local traditions to create new forms of expression. This flow of ideas is gradual but persistent, a quiet blending that enriches each community without erasing its distinct character. The boats themselves are practical vessels, designed for the specific conditions of the Aegean. They are small enough to be handled by a few people, but sturdy enough to manage open water. Construction methods are refined over generations, each builder learning from those who came before and contributing their own improvements. Sails are woven from plant fibres, and oars are shaped from wood that balances strength and flexibility. Repairs are made as needed, a constant process of maintenance that keeps the fleet functional. Fishing and trading often overlap. A boat that goes out for fish may also carry goods to exchange at a nearby island. The return journey brings back what was acquired, along with a fresh catch. This efficiency is typical of a culture that values resourcefulness, where every trip serves multiple purposes and nothing is wasted. Time on the water is used well, and the relationships formed through these repeated interactions become as valuable as the goods being traded. Seasonal patterns affect trade routes. Certain products are only available at specific times of year, and traders plan their journeys accordingly. Olive oil is pressed after the autumn harvest, and boats carry it to markets while the supply is fresh. Grain moves after the summer harvest. Wine ferments through the fall and winter, ready for transport in spring. These cycles create predictable rhythms, a calendar of exchange that structures the year. Shared festivals and gatherings bring people from multiple islands together, creating opportunities for trade but also for celebration and connection. These events are anticipated, prepared for with care, and enjoyed as communal experiences that reinforce the bonds between settlements. Goods change hands, yes, but so do stories, friendships, and the sense of belonging to something larger than a single island or household. The sea also serves as a source of shared identity. People who live on islands understand the water in ways that those on the mainland do not. They know its gifts and its demands, its capacity for both abundance and challenge. This understanding creates a common ground, a basis for mutual respect and cooperation. When you meet someone from another island, there is recognition, an immediate sense of kinship that comes from navigating the same waters and depending on the same currents. Pirates and raiders exist, but they are not the defining feature of sea travel. Most journeys are peaceful, encounters are friendly, and the expectation is cooperation rather than conflict. When problems arise, they are dealt with through negotiation and community response. The network of islands functions best when trust is maintained, and most people have a stake in preserving that trust. Trade also carries risk. Weather can turn unexpectedly, boats can be damaged, and goods can be lost. These risks are managed through experience and caution, through choosing routes carefully and paying attention to signs. Losses occur, but they are absorbed by the community, shared among those who participate in the network. No single failure is catastrophic because the system itself is resilient, built on many connections rather than relying on just a few. The movement of people accompanies the movement of goods. Families sometimes relocate to other islands, seeking new opportunities or joining relatives. Marriages connect communities, creating ties that span the water. Craftspeople travel to learn new techniques or to find markets for their work. This mobility is accepted, even encouraged, as part of what keeps the region vibrant and adaptable. In all of this, the sea remains central, the medium through which connection happens. Its presence is constant, its character familiar, and the life built around it reflects an understanding that isolation is not desirable or sustainable. The Aegean is a world of relationships, of exchanges and interactions that create a fabric of shared existence. Trade is the practical expression of that, but the deeper reality is community, the knowledge that you are not alone, that others face the same challenges and share the same hopes, and that the sea, vast and ever-present, ties you all together. When the sun dips below the horizon and the day's work is complete, a different kind of time begins. Evenings are for gathering, for the quiet conversations and storytelling that knit the community together. This is when the past becomes present, when memories are shared and the accumulated wisdom of generations is passed along. You settle into a familiar spot, perhaps on a low wall or a bench worn smooth by years of use. Others join, arriving in twos and threes, their faces lit by the last of the daylight and then by the glow of oil lamps or the small fire that someone has kindled. The transition from day to evening is gradual, marked not by abrupt change but by the gentle shift in light and temperature. by the way voices soften and the pace of movement slowing. Stories emerge naturally from conversation. Someone mentions a task completed or a challenge faced, and this reminds another of a similar situation from years ago. The memory is shared, details offered, and soon the group is engaged in a collective recollection. These stories are not grand narratives, but the small histories that make up daily life, the lessons learned from experience and the patterns noticed over time. Elders are central to this process. Their years have given them a depth of knowledge that younger people respect and seek out. When an elder speaks, others listen, not out of obligation, but because what is being offered has value. The elder's memory reaches back further, connecting the present to times that others can only know through these accounts. Events that happened decades ago are described. Places that have changed are recalled as they once were, and through this sharing, the continuity of the community is reinforced. The stories are not limited to human affairs. Much of what is shared concerns the natural world, the observations that help explain how things work, the behaviour of animals, the patterns of weather, and the cycles of growth and dormancy. These topics are endlessly interesting because they are endlessly relevant. Understanding the world around you is survival, but it is also satisfaction, the pleasure of seeing connections and making sense of what you observe. Volcanic activity and earthquakes find their way into these evening conversations, not as sources of fear, but as subjects of explanation. Someone describes an earthquake from their childhood, how the ground moved and what happened afterward. Another recalls seeing smoke rise from a distant island, the way the sky looked for days following. These accounts are measured, factual in tone, and focused on what was noticed and how the community responded. The emphasis is on adaptation, on the ways people adjusted and continued. The language used in storytelling has a rhythm to it, a cadence that makes the narratives easier to remember and repeat. Certain phrases recur, markers that signal familiar territory, a description of the sea's colour, the way ash smells, the sound of stones settling after a tremor. These details anchor the story, giving it texture and making it vivid enough to persist in memory. When you hear a story told multiple times, you begin to recognise these elements, and they become part of your own internal library of images and sensations. Children are present at these gatherings, absorbing what is said even when they do not fully understand it. They learn by listening, by watching how stories are told, and how adults engage with the past. Some stories are directed specifically at them, simplified and shaped to teach particular lessons. Others are for the whole group, and children glean what they can, their understanding deepening as they grow and hear the same stories again in different contexts. Reflection is as important as the stories themselves. After a narrative is shared, there is often a pause, a space where people consider what was said. Someone might add a detail, or offer a different perspective, or simply sit with the information and let it settle. This quietness is valued, a recognition that meaning is not always immediate, that understanding can deepen in the silence following words. Humour appears in these gatherings, gentle and warm. Someone makes an observation about human nature, a wry comment on the predictability of certain behaviours, or the irony of situations that repeat across generations. Laughter is soft, more a shared acknowledgement than a loud release. It serves to lighten the mood without diminishing the substance of what is being discussed. The physical setting contributes to the atmosphere. The evening air is cooler, a relief after the heat of the day. The sky darkens gradually, stars appearing one by one until the dome above is filled with light. The sea is audible, a steady backdrop of waves meeting the shore. These sensory elements create a context that feels safe and conducive to openness, to the kind of sharing that happens when people are relaxed and comfortable. Memory itself is a topic of reflection. People discuss how certain events are remembered and why some details persist while others fade. There is an awareness that memory is not perfect, that it shifts and is shaped by retelling, but there is also confidence in the collective nature of the process. What one person forgets, another remembers. Discrepancies are noted and discussed, and a version emerges that the group can accept as close enough to what happened. These evening gatherings serve multiple purposes. They educate, preserving knowledge that is essential for navigating the world. They entertain, providing enjoyment and the pleasure of narrative. They connect, strengthening the bonds between individuals and reinforcing the sense of shared identity. And they comfort, offering the reassurance that comes from continuity, from knowing that you are part of a lineage that stretches back and will continue forward. As the evening deepens, the conversation eventually winds down. People begin to drift away, heading to their homes and the rest that awaits. The fire, if there was one, burns low. The lamps are extinguished or carried inside. The gathering dissolves, but the stories linger, held in the minds of those who heard them, ready to be recalled and shared again when the next evening comes. Night settles over the Aegean with a gentle completeness. The last light fades from the western sky, and darkness becomes a presence that wraps around the island, softening edges and quieting sounds. This is the time when rest deepens, when the world pauses in a way that feels both familiar and timeless. You lie on your sleeping mat, the fabric cool against your skin. Through the open doorway or window, you can see a slice of sky, stars bright and clear in the absence of competing light. The moon, if it is visible, casts a pale glow that touches rooftops and the surface of the sea, creating a landscape rendered in shades of silver and shadow. This light is enough to navigate by if needed, but mostly it serves as a gentle presence, a reminder that even in darkness, the world is not empty. The sounds of night are subtle. The sea continues its rhythm, waves arriving and retreating in a pattern that requires no attention, yet provides a constant, soothing background. Occasionally a night bird calls, or the breeze stirs through the olive trees with a rustling whisper. These sounds are part of the fabric of nighttime, familiar and unremarkable, but together they create an atmosphere of calm. Sleep comes easily after a day of physical work. Your body, tired in the way that comes from useful effort, relaxes fully. Breathing slows, thoughts drift, and consciousness gradually releases its grip on the details of the day. Dreams may come, sometimes vivid, sometimes vague, but they are just another part of the night's experience, neither significant nor troubling. For those who remain awake, nighttime offers a different quality of awareness. Fishermen who work at night move quietly, preparing nets and boats with practiced efficiency. Their work is focused and deliberate, shaped by the need to be ready when the time is right to launch. Night fishing has its own rewards, certain species more easily caught in darkness, and the men who pursue this work know the rhythms and the techniques that make it successful. Watchfulness is part of nighttime culture, though it is not anxious or fearful. Someone might check on livestock, ensuring that animals are secure. Another might walk the perimeter of the settlement, a casual patrol that confirms all is well. These actions are habitual, a way of maintaining order without needing to articulate the reasons. The community functions on these small acts of care, repeated so often that they become automatic. Children sleep deeply, their rest untroubled. Their bodies, still growing, require long hours of sleep, and they give themselves over to it completely. Parents listen for sounds that might indicate distress, but mostly they trust that all is well, that the night is safe, and their children are protected within it. This trust is not blind but earned, based on countless nights that have passed without incident. The stars overhead have their own significance. They mark the passage of seasons, certain constellations appearing at specific times of year. Sailors use them for navigation, but even those who do not venture far from shore know the major patterns, the clusters and shapes that have names and stories attached. The stars are constant in a way that the changing landscape of the earth is not, and this constancy is comforting. Occasionally the night sky offers something unusual. A meteor streaks across the darkness, bright and brief. A planet shines with a steadier light than the stars. These phenomena are noticed and remarked upon, but they do not inspire dread. They are parts of the natural world, events that happen on their own schedule, and while they are interesting, they do not disrupt the fundamental sense of order. The moon's cycle is tracked, its phases noted because they affect tides and light. A full moon provides enough illumination for certain activities, allowing work to extend into the evening. A new moon brings darker nights, but also the brilliance of stars undiminished by reflected light. Each phase has its character, and people adjust their routines accordingly. Night is also when the land seems to breathe differently. The heat of the day dissipates, and coolness rises from the ground. Dew forms on leaves and grass, small droplets that catch the moonlight. The air smells different, cleaner somehow, less layered with the sense of human activity. This freshness is one of night's quiet gifts, a renewal that happens without fanfare. For some, nighttime is a period of reflection. Lying awake in the darkness, thoughts wander to questions and considerations that the busyness of the day does not allow. These are not worries but contemplations, the mind turning over ideas at its own pace. Solutions to problems sometimes arrive in these quiet hours, insights emerging when the usual distractions are absent. The continuity of night to night is part of what makes life feel stable. Each evening the sun sets, each morning it rises, and in between there is this interval of rest and quiet. The reliability of this cycle is foundational, a rhythm that does not change even when other things do. Earthquakes happen, weather varies, but night still comes, and with it the opportunity to rest. Sleep itself is seen as restorative, a necessary part of maintaining health and balance. Communities value rest, understanding that without it, people become less capable and less resilient. The practice of retiring early and rising with the sun is not enforced by rule, but by the natural alignment of human biology with the available light. There is no reason to burn oil unnecessarily, and the darkness invites sleep in a way that feels right. The transition from night to morning is gradual. The sky begins to lighten almost imperceptibly, a shift from black to deep blue. Birds start to sing, their calls announcing the coming day. People wake, stretching and preparing to begin again. The night has done its work, providing rest and continuity, and now it steps aside for the activity and warmth of a new day. This nightly rhythm, repeated endlessly, is one of the most fundamental aspects of existence. It requires no maintenance, no effort, yet it shapes everything. In its constancy, night offers a kind of reassurance, a guarantee that no matter what happens during the daylight hours, there will be this return to calm, this opportunity to lay down the day's concerns and simply be. The years turn, each one adding to the layers of experience and memory that make up your community's understanding of the world. Events happen, some ordinary and some unusual, but all are integrated into the ongoing story of life in the Aegean. The landscape shifts slowly, almost imperceptibly within a single lifetime, yet over generations the changes accumulate and become part of what is known and remembered. Volcanic islands sometimes alter their appearance. A vent that was active becomes dormant. A crater fills with rainwater and transforms into a lake. New land emerges from the sea after an eruption, cooling and solidifying until it is firm enough to walk on, though it may take decades before anything grows there. These changes are noticed and incorporated into the mental maps that people carry, adjustments made to reflect the current state of the geography. When such changes are significant enough to affect daily life, they enter the realm of shared memory. A harbour that silts up and becomes unusable is remembered, the story of its decline told so that future generations understand why a particular bay is no longer suitable for anchorage. An earthquake that alters the coastline is recalled in terms of the landmarks that shifted, the stone that tumbled, the way people adapted by building in new locations or reinforcing structures differently. The process of turning an event into memory is gradual. Immediate experience is vivid but chaotic, filled with details that may or may not matter in the long run. As time passes, the memory is refined. What seemed important in the moment may fade, while other aspects gain significance through reflection and discussion. The community collectively decides what is worth preserving, and the story that emerges is shaped by this consensus. In some cases, events from different times or places become conflated. A great flood remembered from one generation is merged with a similar event from another, creating a single narrative that represents both. This is not deception, but the natural working of memory, which organises information by pattern and theme rather than by strict chronology. The resulting story may not be historically precise, but it captures the truth of what such events mean, how they feel, and how people respond. Geological processes that unfold over centuries are harder to track, but their effects are still noted. Coastlines that gradually submerge, leaving old structures partially underwater, become subjects of speculation and narrative. Why did the sea rise? What caused the land to sink? The answers provided may invoke divine action or cosmic shifts, frameworks that make sense within the cultural context even if they do not align with the actual mechanisms. What matters is that the community has an explanation, something that allows them to understand their world as coherent and meaningful. The idea of Atlantis, though you would not know it by that name, begins to take shape in this way. Somewhere in the collective memory of the Aegean, there are stories of islands that change dramatically, of prosperous settlements that were disrupted by natural forces, and of landscapes that were transformed in ways that seemed almost beyond belief. These stories travel, passing from one community to another, blending with other narratives, acquiring details and symbolic weight as they go. By the time such a story reaches a distant place, far from its origin, it has been reshaped many times, the specific details of which island and when have become less clear, but the core idea remains. There was a place, advanced and prosperous, that met with sudden transformation. The story serves as a reflection on impermanence, on the power of nature, on the limits of human control. It is not primarily a historical record, but a narrative that carries meaning, a way of articulating truths about existence that are felt deeply, even if not always spoken directly. You do not know that this story will one day be recorded in texts, that philosophers and historians will debate its origins, or that people in distant times will search for the physical location of Atlantis. For you, it is simply part of the fabric of memory, one story among many that help explain the world. The connection to Santorini, to the eruption that dramatically altered that island's shape, is there in the layers of memory, but it is not isolated or singular. It is woven together with other events, other islands, and other moments when the Earth demonstrated its capacity for change. This weaving is what memory does. It creates continuity not by preserving every detail with perfect accuracy, but by holding on to what matters, by finding patterns and meanings that transcend individual events. The stories that survive are those that serve the community, that teach, that explain, that provide comfort or caution. They are tools for making sense of a world that is dynamic and sometimes unpredictable, yet also reliable and knowable in its broader patterns. As you age, you become one of the carriers of this memory. The stories you heard as a child are now yours to tell, and you notice how your own telling has shifted slightly from what you remember hearing. This is expected, even necessary. Each generation adds its perspective and its experiences, and the story evolves without losing its essence. The process is collaborative and continuous, a conversation across time that does not end. The land and sea continue their slow work. Islands rise and fall, coasts erode and build, and volcanic vents open and close. Life adapts to these changes. Communities relocate or rebuild, and the memory of what was sustains them through the transitions. There is no final state, only an ongoing process, and within that process is the steady rhythm of human presence, observing, adapting, and remembering. The night sky, unchanged in its essential pattern, serves as a constant reference point. The stars you see are the same stars your ancestors saw, and this continuity is profound. It connects you to the past in a way that is direct and visceral, a reminder that while the earth beneath you shifts, some things remain. This balance between change and constancy is what allows life to continue, what makes adaptation possible without loss of identity. The stories you tell, the memories you hold, are part of this same balance. They anchor you to the past while allowing flexibility for the present. They provide context without dictating exact responses. They are living things, sustained through use, through the care taken in telling and listening, through the recognition that what is passed down has value that transcends the moment. In the end, the geomythology of the Santorini Eruption and the story of Atlantis is not about destruction or loss, but about memory and meaning. It is about how communities understand and explain the changes they witness, and how they integrate dramatic events into the ongoing narrative of existence. The eruption, when it happened, was a geological event, a release of energy and material that reshaped the island. But over time it became something more, a touchstone in the collective memory, a symbol of transformation that carried lessons and reflections forward through the generations. You rest now, your thoughts settling as the day fades completely into night. The sea is calm, the stars are bright, and the land beneath you is ancient and enduring. Tomorrow will come with its routines and its surprises, and you will meet it with the knowledge and resilience that have been passed down to you. The story continues, as it always has, woven from memory and experience, from land and sea, from the quiet continuity that defines life in the Aegean. You're stepping into the kitchens, courtyards and taverns of Rome during the height of the empire, where the drinks people prepare and share reveal as much about daily life as the food they eat. Away from grand banquets and ceremonial toasts, ordinary Romans mix, flavour and sip beverages that help them navigate heat, work and rest. The drinks are practical, familiar and quietly creative. Water forms the foundation of Roman hydration, drawn from public fountains, aqueducts and wells scattered throughout the city. You fill clay jugs in the morning, carrying them back to your apartment or workshop, the weight familiar in your hands. The water is cool when fresh, warming slightly as the day progresses. You drink it plain when thirsty, without ceremony or concern. The taste varies depending on the source. Aqueduct water arrives from distant springs, clear and cold. Well water carries the flavour of the soil it passes through, sometimes mineral, sometimes faintly earthy. The public fountains operate constantly, water flowing from carved stone spouts into basins that overflow into drainage channels. You approach in the early morning when the crowds are thinner, holding your jug beneath the stream. The water splashes against the clay, filling the vessel with a sound that echoes off nearby buildings. Other people wait their turn, some holding multiple containers, others just cupping their hands to drink directly from the flow. Wine appears at nearly every meal, but not in the form you might expect. Pure wine is considered too strong, almost barbaric, so you dilute it with water before drinking. The ratio varies by preference and occasion. Some mix 1 part wine to 3 parts water. Others prefer equal measures. The diluted mixture is lighter, easier to drink throughout the day, and less likely to cloud your judgment during work hours. You adjust the proportions based on the wine's strength and your own tolerance. The wine itself ranges in quality. Cheaper varieties are rough and acidic and benefit significantly from dilution. Better wines have smoother flavour profiles, though you still mix them with water out of custom. The colour ranges from pale gold to deep amber to reddish hues, depending on the grapes and fermentation methods. You pour the wine first into the mixing vessel, watching it swirl as you add water, the two liquids blending into a uniform shade. Children drink the same diluted wine, though their portions contain more water. The practice isn't about intoxication, but about making water more palatable and slightly safer. Wine's acidity helps mask flavours that might indicate spoilage. Parents prepare these drinks without much thought, the same way they prepare bread or porridge. A child's cup might contain 1 part wine to 5 or even 10 parts water, barely tinted with colour, enough to provide flavour without noticeable effects. Posca is another common drink, especially among soldiers, labourers and those working outdoors. You make it by mixing water with acetum, a sour wine or vinegar. The result is sharp, refreshing, and surprisingly thirst-quenching under the Mediterranean sun. You add a pinch of herbs sometimes, or a touch of honey if you can afford it. The drink is cheap, practical, and widely available. Legionaries carry it in leather flasks during long marches. Construction workers pause to sip it between hauling stones. The taste is tart, almost bracing, but you grow accustomed to it. Posca wakes you up without weighing you down. It doesn't spoil quickly in heat. You can prepare a large batch in the morning and drink it throughout the day without worry. The simplicity appeals to people who need function over flavour. The sharpness cuts through dust and grit in your mouth after hours of physical labour, providing a clean sensation that plain water doesn't quite achieve. Different workers develop their own Posca preferences. Some like it very sour, barely sweetened. Others add enough honey to balance the acidity into something almost pleasant. You might include crushed coriander seeds for an aromatic quality, or mint leaves for cooling freshness. The variations are personal, developed through trial and adjustment over months or years of daily preparation. Milk appears less frequently than you might expect. Romans drink it fresh when available, usually goat or sheep milk rather than cow. The taste is richer and slightly gamey compared to modern equivalents. You consume it soon after milking because it spoils rapidly in warm weather. Some people enjoy it, particularly in rural areas where livestock are nearby. Others find it too heavy for regular consumption. The texture is thicker than water, coating your mouth and throat, filling your stomach more substantially than other drinks. Milk sometimes appears mixed with wine or used in medicinal preparations. Physicians recommend it for certain ailments, claiming it soothes inflammation or helps rebuild strength after illness. Mothers give it to young children for growth and vitality. But as a daily beverage for adults, it remains uncommon. Cheese and other preserved dairy products are more practical for a society without refrigeration. The transformation of milk into lasting forms makes more sense than drinking something that will sour within hours. Fruit juices show up occasionally, pressed from grapes, pomegranates, or citrus when in season. You drink them fresh or mix them with water to stretch the supply. The juices are sweet, pulpy, and valued as treats rather than staples. Wealthier households serve them more regularly. Common families save them for festivals or special occasions. The pressing process requires effort and equipment, making the juice more precious than the whole fruit, which can at least be eaten without special preparation. Pomegranate juice is particularly valued for its deep red colour and complex sweet tart flavour. You cut the fruit open, separate the seeds, and press them to extract the liquid. The juice stains your hands and any cloth. It contacts a vivid crimson that marks you as someone who's been working with the fruit. The flavour is intense enough that you often dilute it, turning the deep red into a lighter pink wash. The rhythm of drinking follows the day's natural divisions. You start with water or diluted wine at breakfast, sipping while you eat bread and cheese. Midday brings another round of drinks, often Posca if you're working, or diluted wine if you're at home. Evening meals include wine again, mixed to taste and shared with family or neighbours. The pattern is so ingrained that you feel the absence of these drinks as much as their presence. Missing your midday Posca leaves you feeling slightly off balance, as if the day structure has been disrupted. Taverns serve drinks throughout the day, catering to workers, travellers and locals looking for a break. You step inside during a pause, order a cup of wine or Posca, and stand at the counter while you drink. The atmosphere is casual and familiar. People come and go, conversation happens but doesn't demand participation. You finish your drink, pay a few coins, and return to your tasks. The tavern keeper knows the regulars by sight, if not by name, pouring their usual drinks without needing to ask. The tavern interior is dim after bright streets, your eyes adjusting to the change in light. The air smells of wine, bodies, and whatever food is being prepared in the back. The floor is packed earth or simple tile, sometimes damp from spilled drinks or cleaning. Amphoras line the walls, each containing different wines or stored posca. The keeper dips a ladle into the appropriate vessel, pouring your portion into a clay cup that's been used by dozens of people before you and will be used by dozens after. Public fountains provide free water, and you see people stopping to drink straight from the spouts. Children play nearby, splashing and filling containers. The fountains are gathering points, places where different lives briefly intersect. You refill your jug, nod to neighbours, and continue on. The fountains are decorated with varying degrees of elaboration, from simple functional spouts to carved lion heads, or divine figures whose mouths release the water. You develop preferences for certain fountains, favouring those closest to your home or work, or those whose water tastes cleanest. The drinks you consume are unremarkable in the moment, but essential over time. They keep you hydrated, provide mild calories, and mark transitions in your day. You don't think much about them unless they're absent. Then you notice the dryness in your throat, the fatigue that sets in faster without regular sips. The body's need for liquid becomes more apparent in denial than in satisfaction. Street vendors sell drinks in high-traffic areas, calling out to passers-by. You hear them advertising cool wine, fresh posca, and sweetened water. The vendors maintain small setups, sometimes just a table with a few vessels and cups. You stop, make your purchase, drink quickly and move on. The transaction takes moments. The vendor serves dozens or hundreds of customers each day, each interaction brief and functional. Seasonal variations affect what people drink most often. Summer sees increased consumption of posca and cooled wine, anything that helps combat heat. Winter brings more requests for warmed wine at taverns and spiced drinks that provide internal heat. Spring and autumn are moderate, allowing more variety without weather extremes dictating choices. You adjust your drinking patterns with the seasons as naturally as you adjust your clothing, responding to environmental conditions without conscious planning. Different social classes drink the same basic beverages, but in different qualities and contexts. A wealthy merchant drinks diluted wine just as a labourer does, but the merchant's wine comes from better grapes, stored in finer vessels and mixed with purer water. The labourer's wine is rougher and cheaper, but still recognisable as the same type of drink. This shared practice across classes creates a common experience, even as quality differences mark status distinctions. Water quality concerns affect everyone. You learn which sources are most reliable, which fountains occasionally run muddy after heavy rains, and which wells are known for particularly good taste. The knowledge is practical and widely shared. You warn newcomers away from questionable sources and recommend the better options. The information passes through conversation, a collective wisdom about resources essential to survival. Mixing drinks happens in kitchens, workshops, and tavern storage rooms, spaces where practicality governs every choice. You start with basic ingredients and adjust according to taste, weather, and available supplies. The process is straightforward, learned through observation rather than written instruction. Your hands know the movements from repetition. The proportions are estimated by eye and experience rather than measured precisely. Wine storage begins in large clay amphorae, sealed with cork and wax to prevent spoilage. You keep them in cool, dark corners of your home or shop. The vessels are heavy, holding enough wine to last weeks or months depending on household size. When preparing wine for drinking, you pour it into a mixing bowl called a crater. The vessel is wide and shallow, designed for blending. The crater sits on a sturdy surface, stable enough that it won't tip when you stir vigorously. You add water from a separate jug, stirring with a ladle until the mixture reaches your preferred strength. The act of mixing is social as much as practical. When guests arrive, you prepare the wine in front of them, asking their preference. Some like it stronger. Others want barely a hint of wine in their water. You adjust accordingly, and the preparation becomes part of hospitality. The crater sits on a table or stand, accessible to everyone. People can observe the mixing process, seeing that you're not holding back the better wine or over-diluting their portions. The ladle you use for mixing is usually bronze or wood, worn smooth from years of contact with liquid. You dip it into the wine, then the water, watching the colours blend. Sometimes you taste the mixture partway through, adjusting if needed. The process is inexact, but reliable. You've made enough mixed wine to know what the right balance looks like and how it should flow from the ladle back into the crater. Temperature matters significantly. During summer, you cool your mixing water by storing jugs in shaded courtyards or wrapping them in damp cloth. The evaporation lowers the temperature slightly, making the final drink more refreshing. Winter brings a different approach. You warm wine gently over a brazier, adding spices like cinnamon or pepper to create a drink called calda. The warmth spreads through your chest and fingers, welcome on cold evenings. You're careful not to heat the wine too much, as excessive heat drives off flavour and creates an acrid taste. The warming process requires attention. You place a bronze vessel containing the wine near glowing coals, not directly on them. The heat should be gentle and even. You stir occasionally, checking the temperature by touch. When the wine is warm enough to feel pleasant against your palm but not hot enough to scald, it's ready. You add your spices while it warms, giving them time to infuse properly. The kitchen fills with the scent of warmed wine and aromatics, a distinctive smell that signals cold weather comfort. Posca preparation is simpler, but still requires judgment. You pour acetum into water, usually 1 part vinegar to 8 or 10 parts water, though ratios vary widely. Some people add crushed coriander seeds or mint leaves while mixing. Others include a spoonful of honey to balance the sourness. You stir until the honey dissolves, then taste and adjust. The drink keeps for days without losing quality, actually improving slightly as flavours meld. The honey addition requires care. If you add it to cold water, it sinks to the bottom and takes considerable stirring to incorporate. You can speed the process by warming the water slightly first, or by dissolving the honey in a small amount of warm water before adding it to the main batch. You watch the cloudiness clear as the honey finally disperses completely, leaving the liquid transparent again, slightly amber tinted from the honey's colour. Honey plays a frequent role in drink preparation. You dissolve it in warm water first, creating a sweet base called mulsum when combined with wine. The honey must be pure and well mixed, or it settles at the bottom of the cup. You use a wooden spoon, stirring slowly until the mixture turns clear and uniform. Mulsum is popular as a first drink during meals, gently sweet and lighter than spiced wines. The sweetness feels like a welcome, an invitation to relax and enjoy what follows. Different honeys create different flavours in mulsum. Thyme honey is common in your area, producing a distinctive herbal undertone. Some wealthy households acquire honey from specific regions known for particular qualities. Sicilian honey is darker and more robust. Greek honey from slopes where bees feed on wildflowers creates a lighter, more delicate flavour. You work with what you can obtain or afford, but you appreciate the differences when you encounter them. Herbs and spices get added according to season and availability. You crush dried rose petals into wine for floral notes. Thyme, oregano, and marjoram appear in everyday mixtures, adding subtle complexity. The herbs you use are often the same ones that flavour your food, creating continuity between what you eat and what you drink. You keep dried herbs hanging in your kitchen, easily accessed when needed. The crushing releases oils that have concentrated during the drying process, producing more intense flavour than fresh herbs would provide. Pepper and ginger show up in fancier preparations, imported from distant trade routes and used sparingly because of cost. You grind them with a mortar and pestle, releasing oils before stirring them into warmed wine. The grinding requires effort, especially with dried ginger root, which is hard and fibrous. You pound it into smaller pieces first, then grind those into powder. The result is intensely aromatic. potent enough that a small amount suffices for an entire vessel of wine. Fruit-infused drinks require more time and planning. You slice quinces or dates, letting them steep in wine for days or weeks. The fruit softens and releases flavour gradually. You strain the liquid before serving, though some people enjoy eating the wine-soaked fruit afterward. The infusion process happens in sealed containers, checked occasionally to ensure nothing has spoiled. The fruit plumps as it absorbs wine, and the wine darkens as it draws out colour and flavour from the fruit. Quinces are particularly good for infusion because their firm flesh doesn't disintegrate quickly. You cut them into thick slices, removing the core but leaving the skin, which adds tannins that complement the wine. The resulting drink is complex, the quince adding a floral, slightly astringent quality that balances the wine's natural sweetness. You might infuse a large amphora this way, creating enough flavoured wine to last through several weeks of special occasions. Fermentation knowledge shapes more specialised drinks. You understand that grape juice becomes wine through time and controlled conditions, but other fruits can undergo similar transformations. Pomegranate wine appears occasionally, made by crushing the seeds and letting the juice ferment in covered jars. The process is less reliable than grape wine, but when it works the result is tart and interesting. The fermentation can go wrong more easily than with grapes, producing off flavours or vinegar instead of pleasant wine. Some cooks prepare drinks with grains, creating early versions of beer-like beverages. The process involves soaking barley, allowing it to sprout slightly, then drying and grinding it. You mix the grain with water and let it sit in warmth, where natural yeasts begin fermentation. The drink that results is cloudy, mildly alcoholic, and filling. It's less common in Rome itself, but appears in provinces where grain is more abundant than grapes. The drink is thick enough that it's almost food, providing substantial calories along with its liquid content. Storage vessels matter as much as ingredients. Clay amphora keep wine stable for months if properly sealed. The porous clay allows minimal air exchange, which can actually improve wine over time. Leather flasks are practical for travel but can impart flavour over time, adding slight tannic notes from the leather itself. Glass bottles exist but are expensive and fragile, reserved for valued wines or medicinal preparations. You choose containers based on how long you plan to store a drink and how you'll transport it. Each type of vessel requires different handling. Amphorae are heavy and unwieldy, needing 2 people to move when full. You open them by carefully removing the cork and wax seal, a process that can't be reversed. Once opened, the wine must be consumed or transferred to smaller vessels within a reasonable time. Leather flasks need regular cleaning to prevent them from developing sour smells. Glass requires careful handling and storage where it won't be knocked over. Straining removes sediment and unwanted particles. You pour wine through cloth or woven baskets, catching bits of cork, grape skins or spices. The process clarifies the drink, making it smoother and more pleasant. Some sediment is acceptable, even expected, but excessive cloudiness suggests poor quality or improper storage. The straining cloth becomes stained over time, taking on wine colours that never fully wash out. You dedicate specific clothes to this purpose, not expecting them to remain presentable for other uses. Cleaning vessels between uses prevents contamination and off flavours. You rinse mixing bowls, cups and storage jars with water, sometimes adding sand or ash to scrub away residue. The task is routine, handled while cleaning up after meals. Well-maintained vessels last for years. Neglected ones develop off flavours that taint every drink prepared in them. You pay particular attention to corners and narrow necks where residue can hide and create problems later. The sand you use for scrubbing is fine-grained and abrasive enough to remove stuck-on material without scratching the clay too severely. You scoop it damp from near the fountain, rubbing it around the interior of the vessel in firm circles. The gritty texture provides friction that loosens dried wine or honey. Afterward you rinse thoroughly, ensuring no sand remains to create grittiness in the next batch of drinks. Preparation happens in cycles tied to daily rhythms. You mix drinks in the morning for the day ahead. Mid-afternoon might call for fresh bosca if the earlier batch is gone. Evening preparation is more deliberate, with time to warm wine, add spices, and let flavours meld while you finish other tasks. The rhythm becomes automatic, your body knowing when it's time to prepare the next round, without needing to consciously track time. Drinking together creates connection, without requiring elaborate ceremony. You sit with family after the evening meal, cups of diluted wine in hand, conversation drifting between the day's events and small observations. The drinks facilitate the gathering more than they define it. You sip slowly, refilling cups as needed from the communal crater. The vessel sits within easy reach, and people help themselves or pour for others as cups empty. The conversation flows around the drinking rather than being directed by it. Someone mentions a price change at the market. Another person describes an interaction with a difficult neighbour. You contribute your own observations about the day's work. The cups provide something to hold during pauses, something to do with your hands during moments when you're listening rather than speaking. The regular rhythm of sipping creates natural breaks in the conversation. Taverns offer a different kind of sharing. You enter after work, finding familiar faces among strangers. The tavern keeper knows your usual order. You receive your cup and join others standing or seated on simple benches. Conversation happens in fragments. Someone mentions the weather. Another complains about rising grain prices. You add a comment or listen, both acceptable options. The drink gives your hand something to hold while you decide whether to engage. The tavern's social dynamic is informal and fluid. You can stand alone at the counter drinking in solitude while surrounded by people, or you can drift into conversation with whoever is nearby. The level of interaction is entirely up to you, determined by your mood and energy rather than social obligation. People respect the choice to remain quiet, not interpreting silence as unfriendliness. Shared cups appear in more intimate settings. When visiting a friend's home, you might drink from the same cup, passing it back and forth as you talk. The act signals trust and comfort. Each person drinks a measured amount before handing it to the other. The cup becomes a kind of conversation marker, creating natural pauses in speech. You hand it over, and the other person drinks while you finish your thought or take a breath before continuing. The practice of sharing a cup goes back to childhood friendships, when you had fewer possessions and sharing was necessary rather than symbolic. The habit continues into adulthood, carrying those associations of closeness and mutual regard. You don't share cups with everyone, only with people you know well enough that the intimacy feels appropriate rather than presumptuous. Work crews share large containers of posca during breaks. You gather in shade, each person using a communal ladle to fill their own cup or drinking directly in turn. The drink is egalitarian. Foremen drink the same posca as labourers. The shared container reinforces the temporary community formed by the task at hand. You stand together, drinking and resting, distinctions of role and authority temporarily softened by shared thirst and shared refreshment. The container is usually a large ceramic vessel, too heavy to pass around easily. It sits in a central location, and people approach it when ready to drink. The ladle is shared, dipped by different hands throughout the break. You don't think about hygiene in the way later societies will. The sharing is a normal, unremarkable part of collective life that prioritises practicality over individual preference. Toasting exists, but is less formal than later traditions. You raise your cup towards someone before drinking, acknowledging them. The gesture is simple and usually wordless. It happens between friends reuniting, business partners finalising agreements, or family members marking small celebrations. You drink after the acknowledgement, and the moment passes without fanfare. The toast isn't an announcement but a quiet recognition, meaningful to those involved without requiring an audience or elaboration. Religious observances include drink offerings, but these are poured out rather than consumed. You pour wine or milk onto an altar, or into the ground before a meal, honouring household gods or marking significant dates. The act is brief, integrated into daily routine rather than separated as a major ritual. After the offering, you continue with your meal and drinks normally. The gods receive their portion first, then human needs are addressed. The offering is usually small, just enough to demonstrate respect and remembrance. You don't waste large quantities, as the gods don't require excess to be honoured. A splash of wine darkens the stone altar or disappears into the earth. You murmur a conventional phrase or simply make the gesture in silence. The practice is so familiar that you perform it almost automatically, though the intention behind it remains genuine. Marketplace vendors sell drinks to passers-by, creating mobile social points. You stop at a stall, request a cup of cooled wine or posca, and drink while watching the crowd. Other customers come and go. You might exchange a few words with the vendor or simply drink and leave. The interaction is transactional but not unfriendly. The vendor knows their regular customers, asks about family or work, remembers preferences, and adjusts drinks accordingly. Festivals bring larger gatherings and more generous drinking. You attend neighbourhood celebrations where wine flows more freely than usual. The drinks are still diluted and still consumed with food, but quantities increase. You see people becoming more animated and louder, but rarely out of control. The social pressure to maintain dignity remains even during festivities. You drink more than on an ordinary day, but the increase is moderate rather than dramatic. The festival atmosphere encourages generosity. People who normally guard their better wine bring it out to share. You taste varieties you couldn't afford to buy regularly. The sharing creates goodwill, strengthens neighbourhood bonds, and allows everyone to participate in celebration regardless of their usual means. You contribute what you can, whether that's your own wine or help with preparation and cleanup. Sharing drinks across social classes happens more fluidly than you might expect. A wealthy patron might offer wine to clients who visit seeking favours or employment. You accept the drink, understanding it as part of the social exchange. The wine quality might differ from what the patron serves his equals, but the gesture of offering remains meaningful. You drink gratefully, aware that the relationship is unequal, but also that small courtesies maintain the bonds that structure society. Seasonal drinks mark the year's progression and create shared experiences that transcend individual circumstances. During harvest, you drink new wine that's barely fermented, cloudy and sweet. Winter brings spiced, warmed wines. Spring sees fresh herb infusions. Summer demands cooler, lighter drinks. These patterns are shared knowledge, experienced by everyone regardless of status. You can discuss the qualities of this year's new wine with anyone, from slaves to senators, finding common ground in the shared experience. Gift-giving sometimes involves drinks. You bring a small amphora of decent wine when invited to dinner, offering it to your host. The gift acknowledges hospitality and contributes to the evening's supplies. Your host might open it immediately or save it, depending on what's already prepared. The choice is theirs, and you don't take offence either way. The gift has fulfilled its purpose in the offering. Drinking in public baths occurs in designated areas. You finish bathing and move to relaxation rooms where vendors sell wine and light snacks. You buy a cup, sitting on benches while your body adjusts to normal temperature. Other bathers do the same. Conversation is casual, bodies tired from heat and exercise. The combination of warmth, relaxation, and mild wine creates a pleasant drowsiness. You sip slowly, in no hurry to leave. The bath vendors know they have a captive audience of relaxed customers and price their drinks accordingly. You pay more than you would at a tavern, but the convenience and the context make it worthwhile. You're too relaxed to feel like walking elsewhere, and the drink complements the bathing experience perfectly. Children observe these customs, learning by watching. They see how adults mix drinks when refills are appropriate, and how to accept or decline offers. The education is informal but thorough. By the time they are old enough to drink wine regularly, the social patterns are deeply familiar. They know without being told how to participate in shared drinking, how to moderate consumption, and how to use drinks to facilitate social interaction. Refusing a drink is acceptable when done politely. You might be too full, not thirsty, or simply prefer not to drink at that moment. You decline with a small gesture, perhaps placing your hand briefly over your cup. and the offer isn't repeated insistently. The social fabric is secure enough to accommodate individual preference without interpretation as insult. Your host might ask once if you're certain, but accepts your refusal without pressing further. Midday heat drives you indoors or into shade, where drinking becomes part of a broader pause. You set down your tools or step away from your tasks, finding a cooler spot. Someone has prepared posca or diluted wine. You drink slowly, letting the liquid cool your throat. The break lasts long enough for your heart rate to settle, and for the immediate urgency of labour to fade. Your breathing returns to normal. Sweat dries on your skin, leaving salt residue that you'll wash away later. The shade you find might be under a colonnade, against a wall that hasn't yet absorbed the day's heat, or beneath an awning stretched over a work area. You lean against whatever support is available, grateful for the moment of stillness. Your muscles relax incrementally. The drink helps, but the rest itself is equally important. You close your eyes briefly, gathering strength for the afternoon's work. Construction sites grow quiet during the hottest hours. Workers cluster under awnings or lean against walls in shadow. You drink from a shared container, the posca sharp enough to cut through dust in your mouth. You don't talk much. The break is about recovery more than socializing. You drink, rest, and wait for the temperature to become bearable again. Some workers lie down completely, using bundles of cloth as pillows, catching brief sleep before resuming work. The site supervisor doesn't discourage these rest periods, understanding that pushing through extreme heat leads to accidents and injuries. Better to lose an hour to rest than to have someone collapse from heat exhaustion, or make a costly mistake due to fatigue. You finish your drink, set the cup aside, and find a comfortable position. The heat is visible, creating shimmering distortions in the air. You wait for it to pass. Agricultural workers follow similar patterns. You leave the fields when the sun is highest, gathering under trees or returning to farm buildings. Cups of water or light wine appear, distributed among the crew. You drink while sitting, your back against rough wood or stone. Sweat dries slowly. The drink replenishes what you've lost to heat and effort. Your hands are dirty from field work, but you drink anyway. Washing can wait until the day is done. The trees you gather under are old and spreading, planted generations ago specifically to provide shade during harvest. The earth beneath them is packed hard from years of workers sitting in the same spots. You find your preferred location almost unconsciously, settling into a groove that fits your body. The shade is noticeably cooler than the open field, perhaps only a few degrees, but enough to feel like relief. Workshops pause less formally than outdoor work sites. You work indoors, away from direct sun, but still need breaks. You keep a jug nearby, drinking whenever thirst strikes. The intervals vary based on the work. Hot tasks near furnaces or ovens require more frequent sips. Quieter work like weaving or accounting allows you to drink according to preference rather than necessity. You develop a rhythm, knowing without thinking when it's time for another cup. The workshop air is often thick with heat trapped under the roof, sometimes worse than being outside. But at least you're shielded from direct sun. You pause at your workbench, lifting the cup to your lips while still mentally engaged with the task ahead. The drink is quick and functional, allowing you to return to work without significant interruption. Afternoon drinking is purposeful rather than leisurely. You drink to continue functioning, to maintain focus through the remaining hours. The beverages are simple and quick to consume. You don't linger over them. The cup is empty and set aside, and you return to work when ready. The break is measured in minutes rather than longer periods. You take what you need and resume, knowing that proper rest will come in the evening. Markets slow during midday. Vendors retreat into shade behind their stalls. You see them drinking from clay cups, wiping sweat from their faces with cloth. Customers are scarce during this period. The vendors rest, drink, and wait for evening traffic to resume. The rhythm is universal enough that you notice when someone defies it, continuing to work through heat. Such dedication seems either admirable or foolish depending on circumstances. The market stalls themselves offer minimal shade. often just cloth stretched overhead. The vendors sit on stools or directly on the ground, their wares arranged in front of them. They drink slowly, making their supply last until business picks up again. Some vendors use the quiet time to prepare food for themselves, eating and drinking while waiting for customers to return. Household structure rests around meals and drinks. After the midday meal, you drink diluted wine while the household quiets. Children might nap. Adults sit in courtyards, handling small tasks that don't require heavy labour. The drinks make the transition from eating to resting smoother, occupying hands and mouth while energy settles. You feel pleasantly full, slightly drowsy, and content to sit quietly until the day's heat begins to wane. The courtyard might have a small fountain or plants that cool the air slightly. You sit where air movement is best. What little breeze exists finding its way to your location. The drink is cool at first, warming in your hand as you hold it. You sip intermittently, spacing out the consumption to extend the period of rest. Older people drink more frequently in smaller amounts throughout the day. You observe grandparents or aging neighbours sipping constantly, maintaining hydration without overtaxing digestion. They keep cups within reach, filling them as needed. The pattern is practical, adjusted to changing bodies that don't signal thirst as reliably as they once did. They drink preemptively, preventing discomfort rather than responding to it. Their cups are often smaller than those used by younger adults, appropriate for the reduced quantities they consume at once. They might drink a dozen small cups throughout the day, totaling the same amount a younger person would drink in 5 or 6 larger portions. The frequent drinking also gives them regular reasons to move, to stand and walk to the water source, maintaining activity that keeps aging bodies functional. Seasonal variations affect rest rhythms significantly. Summer demands longer, more frequent breaks with cooler drinks. You might stop working 3 or 4 times during the day seeking shade and liquid relief. Winter allows continuous work with warm beverage breaks spaced further apart. You can work for hours without feeling desperate for rest, though you still appreciate the breaks when they come. Spring and fall create moderate patterns, where drinking fits naturally into existing routines without special accommodation. Travel incorporates drinking into its rhythm in predictable ways. You walk for several hours, then pause to rest and drink from your flask. The break serves multiple purposes: hydration, rest for your feet, and a chance to check your route. You drink, stretch, and continue. The pattern repeats throughout the journey. Experienced travellers know where good water sources appear along common routes, planning their stops accordingly. The places where you stop often show signs of countless previous travellers doing the same. Stones arranged for sitting, ground worn smooth from many feet, and sometimes even shade structures built and maintained by no one in particular, but used by everyone. You rest in these spaces gratefully, sharing them briefly with other travellers before each of you continues your separate journeys. Taverns serve people at different points in their rest cycles. Some arrive exhausted, needing a drink before continuing home. Others stop at the beginning of leisure time, using the tavern as a transition space between work and evening. You adapt your drinking pace to your plans. Quick drinks for those continuing onward. Slower consumption for those settling in. The tavern keeper reads these signals, knowing who wants immediate service and who is happy to wait while nursing a single cup. Evening approaches, and the day's heat finally breaks. You drink cooler beverages again, celebrating the temperature shift. The relief is physical and immediate. You feel your body relaxing, tension from heat dissipating. The drink tastes better in this context, more refreshing than it did hours earlier. The same posca or wine that barely satisfied at midday now feels perfectly suited to the moment. Preparation for rest begins with final drinks. You finish diluted wine with your evening meal, the last substantial drinking before sleep. The amount is moderate, enough to complement food without causing discomfort later. You know from experience how much you can drink and still sleep well. The knowledge comes from years of trial and adjustment, learning your own limits and preferences. Grapes grow abundantly in Italian soil, providing the foundation for most drinks. You see vineyards covering hillsides, vines trained on stakes, or vines allowed to climb trees in the traditional manner. Different grape varieties produce different wine characteristics, though most end up mixed with water anyway, which moderates the distinctions. The abundance means wine is accessible to nearly everyone, with quality varying by price rather than availability. The grape harvest is a defining period each autumn. You see whole communities involved in the work, gathering fruit at peak ripeness. The grapes are crushed by foot in large vats, juice flowing through channels into collection vessels. The work is hard but social, accompanied by conversation and occasional songs. Even if you don't work in the vineyards yourself, you're aware of the harvest as it happens, seeing the increased activity and smelling the sweet scent of crushed grapes that fills the air. Different growing regions produce recognizably different wines. Grapes from volcanic soil near Vesuvius have distinctive mineral qualities. Coastal vineyards produce lighter wines with subtle salt notes from sea spray. Mountain grapes create more structured, acidic wines. You develop preferences based on experience, learning which regional styles you enjoy most. Honey arrives from local beekeepers and distant suppliers. Roman honey comes from bees feeding on thyme, rosemary and wildflowers. The flavour varies by region and season. Spring honey tastes lighter and more floral. Late summer honey is darker and more intense. You buy it in clay jars, checking consistency and aroma before purchase. Good honey dissolves smoothly in warm water. Poor quality honey contains wax particles or crystals that never fully incorporate. The honey market operates through direct sales from beekeepers and through merchants who aggregate honey from multiple sources. You can buy directly if you live near beekeeping areas, getting fresher product at better prices. In the city, you rely on merchants who add their own profit margin but offer convenience and variety. You learn to judge honey quality by colour, viscosity and smell, developing expertise that helps you avoid paying premium prices for inferior products. Spices travel far to reach Roman markets. Pepper comes from India, transported along trade routes that span months. The expense makes it a luxury ingredient, added to drinks in small pinches. The peppercorns are small, hard and wrinkled, and dark brown to black in colour. You grind them as needed, preferring freshly ground pepper to pre-ground versions that lose potency. Cinnamon arrives from even more distant sources, bark rolled and dried for the journey. You use it sparingly, aware of the cost and the distance it travelled. The spice merchants who sell these products are often among the wealthiest traders, their profit margins justified by the risks and distances involved in procurement. You watch them carefully measure out small quantities, weighing them on delicate scales to ensure precise amounts. A few grams of pepper might cost as much as several jugs of ordinary wine. You make your purchase, tucking the precious spice safely away for special occasions. Ginger appears in preserved form, the root dried and hard. You grate or pound it before use, releasing sharp, warming flavours. The spice works well in winter drinks, adding heat that complements actual warmth from braziers. You store it carefully, protecting it from moisture that would cause decay. The dried root can last for months or even years if properly maintained, slowly darkening and intensifying in flavour over time. Local herbs grow wild or in gardens, free for the gathering. Mint spreads easily, and you harvest it throughout the growing season. The leaves bruise easily, releasing oils. You add fresh mint to cold drinks and dried mint to warm ones. The fresh version provides bright, immediate flavour. Dried mint is more concentrated and less vibrant, but perfectly suitable for most purposes. Oregano, thyme, and marjoram grow nearby as well, each contributing different flavour notes when steeped in wine or water. You collect herbs yourself when possible, recognising the plants in fields and waste areas around the city. The knowledge of which plants are useful and which are merely weeds is passed down through families. You learn from parents or neighbours, absorbing information through participation rather than formal instruction. The herbs cost nothing but your time to collect and dry them. Rose petals come from garden roses, picked in the morning when oils are strongest. You dry them in shade, preserving colour and fragrance. The dried petals infuse wine with subtle floral notes. Too many petals make the drink perfumed and unpleasant, tasting more like cosmetics than a beverage. You learn the right proportion through trial and adjustment. A few petals per cup is usually sufficient, creating gentle floral undertones rather than overwhelming rose flavour. The roses grown for petals are different from ornamental varieties, selected over time for their flavour and fragrance rather than just appearance. You know which gardens have the best roses for this purpose, sometimes trading other goods for permission to collect petals during peak season. The dried petals are stored in sealed containers that protect them from moisture and light. Fruit availability follows seasonal patterns that everyone knows. Grapes are abundant in autumn, fresh and sweet. You eat them whole, press them for juice, or dry them into raisins for later use. Pomegranates appear in late fall, their seeds providing both juice and visual interest in drinks. The fruit is labour-intensive to process, but the flavour justifies the effort. Quinces require cooking to become palatable, but their flavour infuses well into wine, creating complex aromatic drinks. Citrus fruits grow in southern regions, arriving in markets when trade permits. Lemons and citrons are valued for their juice, which adds bright acidity to drinks. The fruits are expensive due to limited supply and transport costs. You use them sparingly, a few drops of juice adding significant impact. The rinds can also be dried and used for flavouring, adding bitter aromatic qualities. Dates come from North Africa and eastern provinces. The dried fruits are sweet enough to flavour drinks without added honey. You chop them finely, steeping them in wine until the flesh softens and the liquid takes on caramel notes. The spent fruit is still edible, though wine-soaked and soft. Some people enjoy eating it as a treat. Others discard it, having extracted the desirable flavours into the liquid. The date trade is extensive and well established, with regular shipments arriving by sea. You buy dates in various grades, from premium large fruits to smaller, less expensive options that work perfectly well for drink flavouring, even if they're not beautiful enough to serve whole. The dates keep for months, making them reliable ingredients year-round. Nuts occasionally flavour drinks, particularly almonds. You grind them into paste, mixing the paste with water to create a milky drink. The process is labour-intensive but produces a rich, slightly sweet beverage enjoyed cold. The drink is filling enough to serve as a light meal. The grinding requires significant effort with a mortar and pestle, breaking down the nuts into fine particles that suspend in the liquid. Almond milk prepared this way is different from the thin, clear almond-flavoured water some cooks make. The genuine version is creamy and opaque, substantial in both texture and flavour. You strain out the larger particles before drinking, leaving a smooth liquid that coats your mouth and throat. Salt appears in some drink preparations, particularly those intended to restore balance after heavy sweating. You add a pinch to posca or water, just enough to replace what your body has lost. The amount is subtle, detected only as a slight enhancement of other flavours rather than distinct saltiness. Too much salt ruins the drink, making it unpalatable. You add conservatively, tasting and adjusting. Barley and other grains become drinks in regions where they're plentiful. You sprout, dry and grind the grain, then mix it with water and allow fermentation. The resulting beverage is cloudy, mildly alcoholic and filling. It appears more often in provinces than in Rome itself, where wine is so abundant that grain-based drinks seem unnecessary. The flavour is earthy and bread-like, quite different from wine's fruity qualities. Milk, when used in drinks, comes from goats and sheep grazing on local pastures. The animal's diet affects milk flavour significantly. Spring milk, when animals eat fresh grass and flowers, tastes different from winter milk when they consume stored hay. You drink it fresh, or mix it with wine for medicinal purposes. The combination of wine and milk sounds strange, but has an established place in medical treatments for certain conditions. Vinegar, essential for posca, is made from wine that has soured. Rather than waste spoiled wine, you convert it deliberately into acetum. The process requires exposure to air and time. You keep partially filled vessels in warm spots, checking progress over weeks. The acetum continues to develop complexity as it ages, becoming smoother and more balanced. Young vinegar is sharp and harsh. Well-aged vinegar has depth and roundness. You can purchase vinegar already made, but many households produce their own from wine that has begun to sour. The conversion is inevitable if wine is exposed to air and warmth. You simply guide the process rather than fight it, accepting the transformation and making use of the result. Water quality varies by source in ways that affect the final drinks you make. Aqueduct water is generally clean and fresh, coming from protected mountain sources. Well, water tastes different depending on the surrounding soil and minerals it passes through. Spring water is prized for its coolness and purity. You develop preferences based on taste, but mostly you drink whatever is available and safe. The water used for mixing drinks affects their final flavour, though the effect is subtle when wine or other strong flavours dominate. Trade routes bring exotic ingredients to those who can afford them. Saffron threads from the east add colour and subtle flavour to special drinks. Cardamom pods, though rare, appear in wealthy households. These ingredients mark status as much as they improve taste. You might encounter them at festivals or when visiting prosperous homes. The flavours are novel and interesting, but not necessarily superior to local herbs you know well. The merchants who trade in these rarities cultivate mystique around their products, telling stories of distant origins and difficult procurement. Some of the stories are true, others are exaggerated for effect. You appreciate the flavours when you encounter them, but don't pine for ingredients you can't regularly afford. Preservation techniques extend ingredient availability throughout the year. You dry herbs and fruits during abundance, storing them in sealed containers for winter use. Honey acts as a preservative when added to fruit mixtures. Vinegar prevents spoilage in some preparations. The knowledge of preservation is practical wisdom, passed through generations. You learn what works through observation and experiment, adding your own discoveries to the collective knowledge. The working day ends gradually rather than all at once. You finish tasks, clean tools, and begin transitioning toward evening. Drinking shifts from functional hydration to relaxed consumption. You prepare wine with more care now, adding herbs or warming it if the weather is cool. The pace slows. You're no longer drinking to power through work, but to mark the transition into rest. The light changes as evening approaches, becoming golden and warm rather than the harsh white of midday. Shadows lengthen. The air temperature drops slightly, enough to feel pleasant rather than oppressive. You notice these changes in your body, feeling tension release from your shoulders and back. The drink you prepare reflects this shift, chosen for pleasure rather than pure utility. Family gathers after work, drawn together by the approaching meal and the natural end of daily obligations. You mix drinks for everyone, adjusting strength and flavour to individual preferences. Children receive highly diluted wine. Adults choose their ratios. The preparation is part of settling in, a ritual that marks the boundary between work and rest. You take your time with the mixing, not rushing, enjoying the process as much as the eventual consumption. The family members arrive in sequence, not all at once. Someone finishes work and appears first. Others join gradually. You greet each person, offering them a drink as they settle in. The gathering accumulates naturally rather than being formally convened. Eventually everyone is present, and the evening can properly begin. Conversation during evening drinking is unhurried. You discuss the day's events without urgency or agenda. Someone mentions a neighbour's news. Another describes something seen in the market. You contribute when you have something to add and listen when you don't. The drinks last longer than daytime portions, sipped between exchanges. You might hold the same cup for an hour, refilling it once or twice but never rushing through the contents. The topics of conversation drift from practical matters to more abstract discussions. You talk about plans for upcoming days, repairs needed around the home, and children's progress in their apprenticeships or education. The conversation requires no particular outcome, existing for its own sake rather than to solve problems or make decisions. Courtyards fill with evening light, softer and warmer than midday glare. You sit on benches or stools, cups in hand. The temperature becomes pleasant. You feel your muscles relaxing, tension from labour gradually releasing. The drink is part of this unwinding, but not the sole cause. Time itself creates the transition. Your body knows this is a rest period, responding to environmental cues and learned patterns. The courtyard might have plants growing in containers, herbs, or small trees that provide greenery. Birds settle in for the night, their calls becoming less frequent as darkness approaches. You sit in this peaceful space, grateful for the day's end, not thinking much beyond the present moment. Taverns grow busier as evening progresses. You enter to find more people than during the day, workers finished with their tasks and seeking company. The noise level rises without becoming chaotic. Multiple conversations overlap. You find space at a counter or table, order your drink and become part of the collective atmosphere. The tavern keeper moves efficiently, serving multiple customers, remembering orders and collecting payment. The evening tavern crowd is different from the midday visitors. People are more relaxed and less focused on quick consumption and returning to work. You see groups of friends gathering, colleagues from the same work site sharing stories from the day. The atmosphere is warmer and more convivial, though still maintaining the casual informality that defines tavern culture. Some evenings you stay home, content with your own company or that of immediate family. You drink while handling small domestic tasks, mending clothes, organising supplies, or simply sitting. The beverage gives you something to do with your hands, a reason to pause periodically. The tasks are unhurried, accomplished in the gentle pace that evening allows. Neighbours might visit, appearing at your door as evening settles. You invite them in, offer drinks, and sit together. The visits are informal and unplanned. You talk about shared concerns, repairs needed in the building, upcoming festivals, and changes in the neighbourhood. The drinks facilitate without dominating the interaction. You pour, they accept, and the cups become props in the larger social exchange. These neighbourly visits follow patterns you've learned over years of living in close proximity. You know who might stop by on which evenings, who enjoys conversation, and who prefers brief exchanges. The relationships are comfortable, built on regular interaction rather than deep emotional connection, but valuable nonetheless. Music sometimes accompanies evening drinking in public spaces. A musician plays simple melodies on a flute or stringed instrument. The music isn't a performance so much as a background presence. You listen while drinking, or you don't. The choice is yours. The music continues regardless. The musician appreciates coins tossed into a bowl but doesn't demand payment. The music improves the atmosphere, making the space more pleasant for everyone. Food pairs with evening drinks, though meals are finished. You nibble on olives, bread, or dried fruit while sipping wine. The combination of food and drink extends the evening, creating a buffer zone between the day's work and eventual sleep. You're not particularly hungry, but eating anyway, maintaining social rhythm. The small bites keep your stomach occupied, preventing the wine from feeling too strong on an empty stomach. Wealthier households have more elaborate evening arrangements. You might attend a dinner where drinks are served in specific orders. Mulsum first, then various wines, and finally a digestive drink spiced with herbs. The structure creates its own rhythm. You move through the progression, each drink marking a phase of the evening. The host has planned these transitions, creating an experience rather than just providing refreshment. At such dinners, you recline on couches rather than sitting on chairs, the traditional Roman posture for formal dining. The cups are more decorative, sometimes metal rather than simple clay. Servants mix and serve the drinks rather than people helping themselves. The formality creates distance from everyday drinking, making it special occasion behaviour. Street corners become informal gathering points in good weather. You stand with others, drinks purchased from nearby vendors, The gathering is temporary and fluid. People arrive and leave. Conversation shifts with the changing group. You stay as long as you want, then continue home when ready. The informal nature means you can participate without commitment, leaving when you choose without explanation. Gambling accompanies some evening drinking. You watch others play dice or simple board games, small wagers changing hands. The stakes are modest, the games are social rather than serious. You might participate or simply observe, drink in hand either way. The games give structure to time spent together, providing focus for conversation and friendly competition. Light fades gradually through the evening. You continue drinking as dusk deepens, though you might switch to water or stop altogether. The approaching darkness creates natural endpoints. People begin mentioning the need to get home to prepare for the next day. The gathering disperses slowly without abrupt conclusions. You say your farewells, finish your cup, and begin the short walk home. Some evenings are quieter than others. You drink alone or with one companion, conversation minimal. The comfort comes from shared presence rather than interaction. You sit in comfortable silence, sipping occasionally, watching the day end. The silence isn't awkward but peaceful, each person lost in their own thoughts while still connected by proximity. Weather affects evening patterns significantly. Rain keeps you indoors, creating cozier gatherings in enclosed spaces. The sound of rain provides background rhythm to conversation. Clear nights might draw you outside, where cooler air makes drinking more refreshing. You adapt to conditions without complaint, finding appropriate spaces and drinks for each situation. The flexibility is learned, an acceptance that weather dictates some choices while leaving others to personal preference. Final drinks of the day are often water, clearing your palate and providing hydration for the night ahead. You drink a cup or two after your last meal, rinsing away the taste of wine and food. The water is simple, unadorned, and purely functional. You drink it standing in your kitchen or courtyard, the act quick and practical. The coolness of the water is pleasant after the day's various beverages, providing a clean finish. The water you choose for this final drink might come from a specific source you found that produces the cleanest, most refreshing taste. You prefer it to other available options, though the difference is subtle. The preference is personal, not based on objective quality measures, but on your own experience and associations. Cups and vessels from the day require cleaning before sleep. You rinse them in a basin, scrubbing away residue with your fingers or a cloth. The task is routine, mindless enough that your thoughts wander while your hands work. Clean vessels are arranged to dry, ready for tomorrow's first drinks. The cleaning is thorough without being obsessive, removing visible dirt and preventing build-up that would cause problems later. The basin water becomes cloudy as you work through multiple vessels. You might change it once or twice, depending on how many items need cleaning. The used water is tossed into the street drain or onto plants that can use the moisture. Nothing is wasted unnecessarily. Storage containers need checking before bed. You ensure wine amphorae are properly sealed and that nothing has been left open to spoil. You cover the posca jug if any remains for tomorrow. The crater is emptied and wiped clean. These small acts of maintenance prevent waste and ensure morning drinks are fresh. The habits are so ingrained that you perform them automatically, barely thinking about the actions. Some people prepare drinks for the following day before sleep. You might mix a large batch of posca, knowing you'll want it ready when work begins. The preparation takes only minutes but saves time in the morning rush. You cover the vessel and set it aside, satisfied with the planning. The future-oriented thinking is practical, making tomorrow slightly easier through small efforts today. Children are given final sips of water if they wake thirsty during the night. You keep a small jug near the sleeping area for this purpose. The nighttime drinks are brief, just enough to ease dry throats. Children settle back to sleep quickly, the interruption minor. You attend to them half asleep yourself, the routine so familiar it requires minimal consciousness. Elderly household members might need drinks during the night more frequently. You ensure water is within their reach and easy to find in darkness. The consideration is practical. born of understanding that bodies change with age and that dignity includes independence in small matters like drinking when thirsty. You place the vessel where they can reach it without standing, minimizing the risk of falls or confusion in darkness. Some evenings you drink a calming herbal infusion before bed. You prepare it with warm water and herbs known for gentle properties, chamomile flowers, lavender, or lemon balm. The drink is soothing without being medicinal, comforting rather than curative. You sip it slowly, letting warmth spread through your chest. The ritual signals the day's end to your body and mind, creating a transition between activity and sleep. The herbs for these bedtime drinks are ones you've collected and dried yourself or purchased from vendors who specialise in such things. You keep them in small containers, protected from moisture and light. The preparation is simple. Hot water poured over a pinch of dried herbs, allowed to steep until the water takes on colour and flavour, then strained and drunk while still warm. Cleanup extends beyond vessels to the spaces where drinking occurred. You wipe tables or counters and sweep floors if spills happen. The tidying creates order, preparing spaces for tomorrow's activities. You work efficiently, ready for rest but unwilling to leave disorder behind. The clean spaces greet you in the morning, making the start of the day slightly more pleasant. Winter nights might see you warming a final cup of spiced wine, drinking it while sitting near fading coals in a brazier. The warmth counteracts the chill that settles as night deepens. You drink slowly, reluctant to leave the heat for cold sleeping quarters. The drink provides comfort and a reason to delay the transition to bed. The spices warm you from inside while the brazier warms your exterior, creating complete comfort. You watch the coals dim as you drink, seeing them shift from red to orange to grey. The heat decreases gradually, matching your decreasing alertness. By the time your cup is empty, the coals are nearly out and you're ready for sleep. Summer nights require different approaches. You drink cool water before sleep, knowing heat will make you thirsty later. You might set a cup within reach of your sleeping mat, anticipating need without wanting to fully wake later. The planning is automatic, learned from previous summers when you woke parched and had to fumble in darkness for water. Better to prepare while still alert. Tavern keepers close their establishments as night deepens, cleaning as they go. You finish your last cup, pay what you owe, and leave them to their work. The streets are quieter now. Most people are already home. You walk through darkness, familiar with the route. The day's final drinks are behind you. You think vaguely about tomorrow, but mainly focus on navigating home safely in limited light. The tavern keeper might nod farewell as you leave, already turning to the next task. The relationship is professional but friendly, built on regular patronage. You'll see them again tomorrow or the next day, continuing the pattern that structures both your lives. Home again, you complete final preparations for sleep. You check that everything is secure, that fire hazards are eliminated, and that tomorrow's needs are anticipated. Among these tasks, ensuring drinking water is available stands equal with other practical concerns. You place vessels where you'll find them easily in the morning, in their customary locations where your hand will reach automatically even before full wakefulness. Some nights you're too tired for elaborate routines. You drink water hastily, rinse your cup, and head straight to bed. The routine compresses without disappearing entirely. Even exhausted, you attend to basic needs. The drinks are shorter, the clean-up faster, but the pattern remains. Your body knows what it needs even when your mind is too tired to consciously plan. You settle onto your sleeping mat or bed, the surface familiar beneath you. Darkness is complete now, or nearly so, with perhaps a bit of moonlight or distant lamplight providing minimal illumination. You hear neighbours doing the same, the sounds of a district preparing for sleep. Your thirst is quenched. Your body is tired from the day's work. The drinks you consumed throughout the day have served their purposes: hydration, refreshment, social connection, and comfort. The sounds of the neighbourhood settling are comforting in their familiarity. Shutters closing, voices calling final good nights, doors being secured, animals making their nighttime noises, water being poured, cups being set down. all the small sounds of people completing their evening routines. Sleep comes gradually rather than immediately. Your thoughts drift without direction or urgency. You might recall a particularly good drink you had, or notice that you need to buy more honey tomorrow. These small considerations fade as sleep approaches. Your breathing deepens and slows. The day releases its hold. Rest takes over completely. Morning returns, and with it the same patterns you followed for years. You wake, drink water to ease the night's dryness, and begin preparing drinks for the day ahead. The repetition is comforting rather than monotonous. You know what needs doing. Your hands move through familiar motions without requiring conscious direction. The cup goes to the water jug, the water pours, and you drink. The simplicity is satisfying. The morning water tastes particularly good, your body receptive after hours without liquid. You drink deeply, feeling the cool water travel down your throat and into your stomach. You feel more alert almost immediately, the hydration clearing some of the fog of sleep. Across Rome, thousands of people begin similar routines simultaneously. Vessels are filled from fountains and wells, wine is mixed with water, posca is prepared for workers heading to sites and fields. The drinks are ordinary, beneath notice except in their absence. You participate in this city-wide rhythm without thinking about the collective nature of the act. Yet if you could see all of Rome at once, you'd observe this synchrony. Everyone drinking at roughly the same times in roughly the same ways. Seasons cycle and drinking habits shift accordingly, but the underlying patterns remain constant. Winter drinks are warmed, summer drinks are cooled, spring and autumn require less adjustment. The variations work within an established framework rather than disrupting it. You've seen these cycles many times, you'll see them again. The predictability is reassuring, providing structure to the passing year. You remember winters when you were younger, learning to warm wine properly without scorching it. You remember summers when you discovered which fountain provided the coolest water. These memories accumulate, creating a personal history of drinking that mirrors the larger cultural patterns. Children grow into adults, learning to mix and share drinks the way they watched others do. The knowledge transfers through observation and practice. No formal instruction is needed. You simply do what you've seen done, adjusting to your own preferences while maintaining the basic customs. A child who watches her parents mix posca every morning will know how to do it herself when the time comes, even without explicit teaching. You see this transmission happening constantly. A young boy carefully pouring water into wine under his father's watchful eye. A girl learning which herbs to add to warm wine by watching her mother. The education is gradual and gentle, integrated into daily life rather than separated as formal lessons. Trade continues bringing new ingredients, but core drinks remain unchanged. Posca is still posca whether you add imported spices or local herbs. Diluted wine tastes familiar even when the wine itself comes from a new region. The foundation is stable enough to accommodate variation without losing identity. A merchant who travels to distant provinces and returns with exotic spices will still prepare his morning posca the same way his grandfather did. Buildings age and are rebuilt. Neighbourhoods change composition. Empires expand and contract. Through all of this, people keep mixing water with wine, preparing posca for hot days, and warming spiced wine for cold evenings. The drinks anchor daily life, providing continuity that outlasts individual circumstances. The buildings where you drink might be torn down and replaced, but the drinks themselves persist. You think about the tavern you frequented as a young person, now replaced by a different building housing a different business. But the tavern that replaced it serves essentially the same drinks to people with essentially the same needs. The faces change, but the patterns continue. You don't think about legacy when you drink. You're focused on immediate needs, thirst, heat, and the desire for a pause. Yet the accumulated effect of millions of such moments creates culture. The way Romans drink becomes part of what it means to be Roman, even when no one articulates this explicitly. Future historians might study grand architectural achievements or military campaigns, but your daily drinks are equally defining of Roman life. Written recipes exist for fancy drinks, preserved by wealthy households or recorded by scholars, but most drinking knowledge lives in practice rather than text. You know how to mix posca because you've done it countless times, because you learned by watching, and because the knowledge is embedded in routine. If someone asked you to write down exact measurements and procedures, you'd struggle. But you can make perfect posca without thinking. This practical knowledge is more reliable than written recipes in some ways. It adapts to available ingredients, to individual preferences, and to changing circumstances. A recipe is fixed. Practiced knowledge is flexible, responsive, and alive. Future generations will drink differently. They'll have access to different ingredients and different technologies for cooling and preserving, but they'll still need hydration. They'll still pause during heat. They'll still drink together as a form of connection. The specifics change. The underlying needs persist. You can't imagine what future drinks might be like, but you know they'll serve the same fundamental purposes. You finish your morning drink already thinking about the day ahead. Work awaits. Tasks need completing. Throughout it all you'll pause to drink. Water, posca, diluted wine, or whatever suits the moment. The drinks will be unremarkable, exactly as they should be. You don't want your drinks to be remarkable. You want them to be reliable, available, and appropriate. Routine has value that transcends novelty. The drinks you consume are the same drinks consumed yesterday and will be consumed tomorrow. This consistency provides structure, creates shared experience, and allows you to focus on other aspects of life without worrying about basic needs. You don't have to decide what to drink each time you're thirsty. The choice is largely predetermined by time of day, weather, and activity. Rome grows and changes around you in visible ways. New aqueducts bring more water to more neighbourhoods. Trade expands, introducing new flavours and ingredients from conquered territories. Fashion shift in elite circles, with wealthy Romans adopting different drinking customs for special occasions. But in homes, workshops and taverns, people keep drinking in ways their grandparents would recognise. The continuity is quiet, almost invisible, yet it shapes daily life as profoundly as any dramatic change. The new aqueduct that opened last year brought celebration and attention, but the daily use of that water is unremarkable, just an extension of patterns that preceded it. The infrastructure changes, the habits remain. You set down your empty cup ready to begin the day. The drink has served its purpose. You're hydrated, alert, and prepared for what comes next. The cup will be used again later, and again after that, for days and months and years. This simple object participates in the rhythm of your life, a small constant in a changing world. The cup is clay, unremarkable, and probably made by one of hundreds of potters working in Rome. But it's your cup, recognisable by a small chip on the rim, fitting your hand perfectly. The sun climbs higher in the sky. Heat builds gradually, the cool morning air warming with each passing hour. Soon you'll want another drink. The pattern continues, reliable as seasons, as fundamental as breathing. You take comfort in this continuity, even if you don't name it as such. The drinks are simply there, part of the fabric of days, quietly sustaining life in ancient Rome. You step into the street, joining others beginning their day. Someone calls a greeting. You respond briefly, continuing toward your destination. Your mind is already engaged with the work ahead, but part of you notes the fountain you'll pass, the possibility of refreshment when needed. The knowledge is automatic, a background awareness that doesn't require active thought. The day unfolds in familiar patterns. You work, you pause, you drink, and you continue. The drinks mark time without announcing themselves. They're present in every hour, supporting activity without becoming the focus of it. This is as it should be. The best drinks are the ones you barely notice, the ones that simply work. Evening will come, bringing its own drinking rhythms. Night will follow, with final cups and preparations for sleep. Tomorrow will begin the cycle again. The pattern repeats indefinitely, as long as you live, as long as Rome stands, and as long as people need water and seek comfort in shared cups. The drinks of Rome are unremarkable and essential, simple and nuanced, and individual and communal. They exist in the background of life, supporting everything else that happens. You drink without thinking much about it, and in that thoughtlessness is a kind of perfection. The drinks work, they sustain, they continue.